I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Last week we took a look at the best boss intro cutscenes. This week we're rolling a natural 1 as I look at the worst boss intro cutscenes from each Soulsborne game. This is a much harder list to sum up because From Software have always been masterful when it comes to their cinematics, so I came up with some simple criteria to help me on my way. 1. How memorable is the cutscene? Do I remember it when I think about that specific game? 2. Cinematic flair. Does it play around with camera angles, dialogue, or anything else to make the boss intro pop? 3. Is this cutscene overshadowed either by a mid-phase transition cutscene, or is it something we've already seen before? Now let's not waste any time, parry that subscribe button to stay up to date on all my future videos, and let's jump in. The worst boss intro cutscenes in each Soulsborne game. Let me know your picks down below. For Demon Souls, I actually found this to be pretty easy, all things considered. If we're talking PS5 specifically, I hate the way the art direction took False King Alance cutscene. His face just doesn't have the same emotion that it has in the PS3 version to make him feel threatening during his introduction. He just looks like an old man chilling. But my pick goes to the Fool's Idol. Most cutscenes in Demon Souls have a moment you can point to that helps a boss stand out. Tower Knight has his shield slam, Flame Lurker jumps across the boss arena, Leechmonger is just a horrifying monster. And then the Fool's Idol appears in 3-1, floating down all casually and not really giving anything beyond surface value. It's actually quite fitting for her fight, given she's merely a puppet of the old monk who has no actual autonomy of her own, but it doesn't change the fact that her casually floating down just doesn't excite me. I also may just dislike how they changed her appearance in the PS5 remake, taking away her ornate headdress that felt befitting of a doll with the appearance of the Queen of Latria, instead giving her some of the worst bedhead I've seen in a long time, and giving her just a crazier look, which goes against her chill and calculated nature of her boss fight. It may sound like I'm nitpicking here, but when the rest of the roster actually has fantastic boss intros, nitpicking is what I have to do to get results. For Dark Souls, I had 3 potential picks I was debating between. Chaos Witch Quelaag was one of them, as despite her boss cutscene being rather iconic, I can't help but think there are other ways to go about depicting her without going for the, ooh, there's a sexy naked woman on top of this fiery spider beast route. Gravelord Nito ended up as my runner-up here because, to be blunt, the visual of him getting up out of his coffin isn't actually all that intimidating, especially if you've been here already as part of the Gravelord Servant Covenant entrance, so you already know how Nito looks and what to expect when you arrive in his arena. Ultimately though, it's Seath the Scaleless that has my least favourite boss intro in Dark Souls. There's just something about the way he flies in that always made me think, that doesn't look right. Now of course, Seath has crystallized most of his body, including his lower legs, so movement has always been a bit of a struggle for him, but there's just something so bland about how that movement is conveyed in the cutscene. He practically flops into the arena like an airplane crash in an Uncharted game. It's kinda embarrassing that the most memorable part of the cutscene is pre-Seath, when the camera pans to the immortal crystal, and then does a frontal shot of said crystal to show its importance. I liked that. It showed the player it was an important item for the boss fight. Then Seath just drops like a rock, and the battle begins. It always stood out as a cutscene I never jived with, and in a game like Dark Souls where a majority of the cutscenes are fantastic and memorable, it's a way more obvious blemish. For Dark Souls 2, you'd expect for the game with the most mid-bosses in the series to have a ton of mid-cutscenes. But honestly, ignoring that god-awful red eye effect at the start of every major boss intro, the actual cinematography here is pretty good. And then there's the old Iron King. Now, long-term viewers know I love this man. His lore is immaculate, and his design may be a bargain bin Balrog from Lord of the Rings, but I fucking adore the Balrog from Lord of the Rings, so I do not care. The problem is, for being such a terrifying demonic creature, his cutscene fully fails to make him feel threatening. He emerges from the lake so far away from the player and the boss arena, and his appearance feels so low energy. He's not really serving face or looks. You can tell he's the type who forgets the Ella. His cutscene consists of him just lazily walking through the lava, which then transitions to gameplay of him walking lazily through the lava to reach the playable area where the fight can actually begin. Honestly, it's a pretty accurate depiction of his boss fight, with the old Iron King having zero urgency in his moveset, so if we're taking that into account, his pre-fight cutscene didn't lie. Worst of all though, you don't even get to see how caked up he is in the boss introduction, because everybody knows the old Iron King has a bakery in the back. It's been memed on to death. But they couldn't even give us those buns in cutscene form. We had to do the research ourselves from software. The other Lord bosses in Dark Souls 2 blow old Iron King out of the water, or should I say the lava, and it's not even close. Moving on to Bloodborne, and I have to admit that I don't think there's a bad boss introduction cutscene in this game, as the pick I've chosen for this video still has potential, even if it's meme potential. Micolash, host of the Nightmare, ends up having my least favourite cutscene of the lot, but I do think Lawrence the First Vicar was a close second, since his was just him waking up and reaching for his skull, but Lawrence had the extra perk of being visible in the overworld until his boss fight is activated, which makes him waking up more interesting in my opinion. Micolash, meanwhile, is a cutscene that subsists purely on its ability to be memed the fuck out of. Every line of dialogue is gold with the eerie drawl he speaks, but most of it is repeated during the boss fight itself, which lessens the intro's dialogue's impact. The slow turn of Micolash in his cage to the camera is a fantastic shot, I won't lie, and the way he saunters off laughing at the end is quite funny, but it doesn't have the sticking power of a Vicar Amelia exploding into blood, or Murgo's wet nurse slamming to the ground with her various weapons at the ready, or the one reborn being birthed from the fucking blood moon. He's a dude. And the moment you actually fight him, you realize just how ironic his opening cutscene is. It's funny, I feel like I'm giving him a ton of compliments here, but that just shows the quality of Bloodborne's boss intros that Micolash is my least favorite, and yet still has fantastic moments to talk about. Which Bloodborne boss cutscene is your least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. As I mentioned in last week's video, there aren't a lot of boss intro cutscenes in Dark Souls 3 to talk about, and many of them are iconic. Like, I'm not putting the Abyss Watchers or Siegward's Yorm cutscene on here or anything, those are amazing moments. So this is more of a pick by default, shall we say. Now, Osiros was almost the runner-up, as I genuinely forgot he had a cutscene, but he's an optional boss in an optional area, so it's not crazy to assume I'd forget him. And his cutscene is interesting. I like the camera angles, I like his dialogue, and how it explains exactly what Osiris' deal is. Something I sadly can't say for Vort of the Boreal Valley. This hurts me, I love Vort so much. But after talking about how much I love the Dancer of the Boreal Valley's intro cutscene in my last video, it highlighted how weak Vort's cutscene is by comparison. They're both beasts of Pontiff Sullivan, Outrider Knights that can be summoned to stop the chosen undead, yet while the Dancer has such an eerie, iconic intro, Vort just kinda walks into the courtyard mace first and doesn't really seem that intimidating. He has a scary roar and you can see ice all over him, which is a nice touch, but in a game where we have the Twin Princes and their lore drops, Slave Knight Gale and his desire for the Dark Soul, Sister Freed and the way she walks barefoot across her arena to scythe you, Vought is just the odd one out, the first boss cutscene in the game, and the one that has the least importance, and that translated to having the least interesting cinematics. Luckily, his fight is iconic thanks to his enraged state music, so I don't think he's hurting or anything. For Sekiro, this is a very easy choice for me. A majority of the major boss fights come with cutscenes that work with the story being told. You either know the characters, or you know that Wolf knows these characters. Lady Butterfly, there's a history there and she looks badass. Great Shinobi Owl, in the words of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 17's Jules Sparkles, is piggy as fuck, because he eats every scene he's in. But there's one fight in the game that doesn't have that connection to the player or the playable characters, and it makes it the worst intro cutscene. It's the folding screen monkeys. They're not bad, it's not a terrible cutscene. They clearly show the objective of the fight to catch the 4 monkeys represented by the screens, and they even show a monkey running away to tell you, hey, go chase him. There's also the fact that this is one of the longer cutscenes in the game, having Sekiro ring the bell in Senpo Temple, then having multiple cinematic shots of the boss arena, then having him scan the monkey screens, then having the purple monkey in his adorable glasses appear before running away. It's a lot, but doesn't have interesting dialogue or characters to actually carry the cutscene. It's serviceable, it does its job and needed to be there. I just think every other cutscene in Sekiro, boss intro or not, are way more interesting than this. Finally, Elden Ring. Like Bloodborne, I truly don't think there's a bad boss intro cutscene in this game. There weren't enough in the DLC, but the DLC fights that got cutscenes fully deserved them, so we're headed back to the base game, and a majority of the boss intro cutscenes went to the Shard Bearers. So who has the worst? It's Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon. When the most memorable aspect of your intro cutscene isn't actually you the boss, but instead the creepy schoolgirls clinging at your character's legs as they laugh creepily, I'm not gonna say something went wrong, but it certainly doesn't lend itself to being a memorable moment in the long run. Rennala spends the cutscene floating in midair, talking to her sweet little Culver, her amber-encrusted egg. Another reason for Rennala taking this spot goes back to my criteria, in that she's overshadowed by herself. Her phase transition cutscene is one of the best in the game, as Ranni conjures an illusion to protect her mother, creating this gorgeous moonlit battle arena that we all agree is iconic, where this illusion of Rennala gets to be an absolute badass bitch. But that's not what we're ranking today, and the existence of a much better Rennala cutscene makes the first appearance with the schoolgirls and the floating headmistress feel lax and uninteresting by comparison. None of the other shard bearers run into this issue, and thus Rennala is my least favorite boss intro cutscene in Elden Ring. And that's my list. Which boss intro cutscenes are your least favorite in the series? Let me know down below. And be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. Next, I'll be tackling phase transition cutscenes, which are the mid-fight cutscenes that we all tend to love and remember, so stay tuned. I want to give a shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. It's $4.99. You get a shout out in the description at the end of videos, and you get access to special Let's Plays as well that are members only. We're currently doing a Soul Level 1 run of Dark Souls 3, so if that's interesting, consider becoming a channel member. You can follow me on Blue Sky if you're at all interested in social medias, and I will see you next time for another video. Adios!